going to wait till some people join here. Welcome, everybody. What's happening? I know this is kind of a strange time for me to go live. I wanted to see what who would show up right now, where everybody's from an undisclosed location. There you go. How many of you have seen my latest video about scale wars? It's funny that when I talk about the darkest scale, I don't think people got the whole dark side thing of Star Wars. The only reason that I used that term was to see if anyone, I think one person mentioned that. If you haven't seen it, check it out. There we go, Austria, 3 a.m. Whoa, crazy. Somebody asked what this piece is. This is an Aiden Essen improvisation from when he was here 2 years ago. 2 years ago. This is one of 27 improvisations he did on the first day that he was here. Anyways, so thoughts on Pat Metheny's Secret Story. Okay, my thoughts on Pat Metheny. I love Pat. I started not digging Pat's records after 1984, the First Circle record. Pat left ECM Records, which he was on from 1975 for Bright Side's Life up through First Circle. Maybe even Song X, I think, with Ornette Coleman. That might have been on. No, that was on Geffen. He said that he wanted to do it at the time because he was getting a better royalty rate and because Manfred Eicher, that started ECM Records, would make people do a record in 2 days. Basically, you had 1 or 2 days to make the record. They would mix it. That would be it. And welcome, everybody. Russia, Morocco, Mexico City. It's awesome. Great to have everybody here. So I'm on my jazz hating thing here because I put out that video last week and I've thought a lot about it. Bulgaria. People hate jazz. It's really amazing. It's really amazing. And I've talked a lot about it with friends. I think I came to some conclusions yesterday while having a discussion. I was talking on Facebook, and I think the roots of it started in the roots of what people call, I guess, smooth jazz. And smooth jazz really started in the 60s with Wes Montgomery, who was one of the greatest jazz guitar players ever. Wes started making records that were of pop tunes at the time. And I'm going to talk about, Spam just said jazz is a pretty broad genre. It is a broad genre, but I'm going to narrow it down here. So, is Kenny G jazz? No. Okay, not in my book. But Kenny G is from a long line of people that started doing these music for the masses that actually led to Muzak. Okay, Wes did records started doing records in the late 60s before he died. And those records were of pop tunes. Like he would do Eleanor Rigby. He had a record with this tune Road Song, which was one of his songs. But they were basically easy listening records where he'd play the melodies to tunes that had just come out and were big tunes on the radio. And then he would they'd have these really heavily orchestrated. Some were great orchestrations and far, far superior to the smooth jazz that's out nowadays. But nonetheless, that was music for the masses. Wes became really big, started making a ton of money, and had a heart attack and died. And then they had to find someone to take his place, which was George Benson. George Benson, they had a record called The New Boss Guitar, and George was perfect. But even better, George sang. George had a massively big hit record with a tune called "Breezin'" in the mid '70s, and then he started having R&B hits as an actual singer. In the meantime, in the '70s, you started having people like Chuck Mangione, who's from my hometown, Rochester, New York. Chuck had a tune called "Feels So Good" that was literally a #1 pop song. I love George Benson. George is one of the greatest guitar players of all time. So was Wes. But that doesn't mean that they didn't contribute to the cool jazz or smooth jazz, or not cool jazz, smooth jazz thing that is really why people hate jazz. Because everybody that's in a restaurant that are, pretty lame players, there's two things that's happened. You have people that are jazz musicians or that people think are jazz musicians that associate with it, that play in restaurants and are really incredibly average players. And then you have this whole rise of academia jazz, okay, that arose in the 80s where people pay money to go to school to learn to play jazz, and then there's no gigs for them to play. And so, anyways, there's this whole industry to kind of promote this thing that's almost almost completely academia based, okay? But what people don't understand is that jazz is a language. I always say this, but what I mean by that is that people that were great at playing jazz actually can play phrases that have sentence structure, that have syntax, that have periods, they have punctuation, things like that. But you have to go back and you've got to listen to stuff that is really jazz. Now, you had big band and swing music of the early part of the 20th century that went up until about, probably 1950 or so. And you had the bands like Duke Ellington and Count Basie. I mean, great, great, great bands. You had Benny Goodman, who, had Charlie Christian playing with him. And then you had bebop, which to me was the beginning of jazz. That was kind of, that's where jazz got started as an art form, was bebop. Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie. Miles wasn't very good at bebop in the 40s with Charlie Parker. When you listen to his solos on some of the tunes like, Billy's Bounce, things like that, Miles didn't get it together. He's a young kid. He didn't get it together till the 50s. Anyway, so that's when it started to get the complexity level. And you had Thelonious Monk, you had all, people that were the early jazz players. You would have Art Tatum, all these people that had really serious backgrounds in music, that had incredible knowledge, and they incorporated this into their into this emerging style that took the rhythms of the early big bands and then started playing fast up-tempo tunes with small groups, playing much more complex solos that had altered notes on the dominant chords, like the flat nines. You started hearing things that you did not hear in the swing era. You didn't really hear flat nines. You didn't hear sharp fives, and you started hearing that in bebop. That was really one of the main differences, the vocabulary of Charlie Parker. But let's just talk. What does jazz sound like? What I consider jazz sound like? It's not music. It's not Kenny G. People will go off and they'll just freak out about how much they hate jazz. I'm going to play you when I think of jazz, this is what I think of. Okay, this is a tune that that I played my kids every day. This is McCoy Tyner. This is a record called The Real McCoy. It came out in 1967. McCoy Tyner on piano, Joe Henderson on the sax, Ron Carter on the bass, Elvin Jones on the drums. This is basically over an F sus chord, the B flat. This goes to B flat in the bridge, and then C altered. This is just over an F7 sus 4 chord here. Okay? The groove. This is jazz right here. Anything else? Kenny G, that ain't jazz. This is jazz right here. Check out the drumming. This is where Led Zeppelin came from John Bonham listening to guys like Elvin Jones. Now check out the solos. End of the first phrase. He keeps punctuating with the left hand. That's Ron on the bass. He goes out by half step. Amazing. Ron, Elvin, lock it in. This is jazz right here. You know, people ask me why my son Dylan's got such a good ear and my kids, because we listen to this every day. Okay, that's McCoy. Then Joe Henderson comes in here. Listen. Listen to Joe's phrases. People are lazy when they're listening. Listen right here. Right here. Right here. Right here. Okay, that's jazz. You want to hear some more jazz? Check this out. We went from the 60s to the 70s now. This is Oscar Peterson, Nels Henning Orsted Pedersen on the bass, and Barney Kessel on the guitar. But listen to Oscar here. This is just a trio. This is live at Ronnie Scott's, 1974. Listen to Oscar. So Oscar here is playing over an F blues, and he basically goes through the evolution of all the different styles of jazz piano, boogie woogie, stride, everything. It's called Blues Etude. This is just a live gig. There's only a video of this. Look up Oscar Peterson Blues Etude. Now, changes the feel. Woo! You hear that swing? That's jazz. Now, changes the feel again to a boogie woogie. This is like jazz history right here in one improvisation. How's it feel again? Oh yeah. Here he is. Okay. You got to listen to that whole thing. It's unbelievable. When he gets going here at the end, it's insane. Okay, that's jazz. I'll play you some more jazz here. This is from the 80s now. We're moving ahead. Jazz kept going. This is a Keith Jarrett trio. Keith Jarrett, Gary Peacock on the bass, Jack DeJohnette on the drums. Listen to the groove. Check out the phrases. Right here. Then. Woo! Yeah. It's one of my favorite lines right here. Check this out. Right here. That's jazz. Tell you what else is jazz. This is jazz right here. Royal Axon, Oleo, Miles Davis, John Coltrane. Paul Chambers in the bass. This is the 50s quintet. Bridge. Now they do this figure every time. Listen. Ba, 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 ba. Listen how Coltrane takes over. Phrases, sentences. Miles Davis Quintet. The Relaxin' record. That's jazz. Oh, wait, my favorite, hold on, my favorite phrase, right here. Right here. Okay, that's jazz. This is jazz too. This is Billy Higgins, Charlie Hayden, Pat Metheny. Rejoicing record. This is a tune called Blues for Pat. Let's get the solo here. It's a Charlie Hayden tune. Here we go. Here we go. All these phrases, see the space there? If you can sing it and it swings that hard, that's real jazz, okay? Now, I see these comments on here, Spyro Gyra. Forget it. These guys were great players and everything, but when you first had Wes doing all this stuff that later became the precursor to Muzak. Then you had Benson doing it, all the orchestral records. But they had great orchestrators. I mean, they had Klaus Ogerman. I mean, they were amazing orchestration. Klaus Ogerman, Nelson Riddle, Don Sebesky did some of them on the Creed Taylor. These Creed Taylor. Creed Taylor was the producer of these records. This is really what became smooth jazz. But then when Chuck Mangione came out with Feel So Good in 1975, or whenever it came out, 75, 76, it became a number one song. And this is then that started the movement with bands like Spyro Gyra and Herb Alpert. Well, that was really from the 60s. That was part of that whole movement too. And then you started getting kind of this fusion music. Some of it was amazingly cool, like, Return to Forever and things like that. And then you got things, and then you had Weather Report. But this undercurrent, you had Grover Washington with Wine Light or whatever that record was, which was just a complete play for money. These were all it was a money play, okay? And jazz became this kind of idea that people have of jazz is when jazz became incredibly popular with these really cheesy records. When you think about people like Chuck Mangione, Feel So Good, a number one song. That's like a Taylor Swift song, you know? I mean, you think about it. That Taylor Swift has number one songs. So does, you name it. I mean, I don't know what's number one right now. I think Taylor Swift has a number one song right now. But people call it elevator music. There's Andrew. Yes, that's what it is. It's elevator music. Essentially, these things really just, some of them actually became Muzak by playing the actual original versions. They didn't even have to be made into Muzak. So when people go to restaurants and see horrible players, and I've got friends that are horrible players, play in restaurants to make a living and everything, and people tune out. I mean, in the United States, you don't go to clubs to hear, you don't go to concerts to hear jazz unless it's a huge name. And there's almost none of those that go. I mean, when I think about, does Keith Jarrett ever come here and play? No, I'm trying to think. Joshua Redman, when did he come here and play? I'm trying to think of what jazz players come to Atlanta. Atlanta is such a lame scene for jazz. It's unbelievable. You'd think for a big city there'd be a halfway decent jazz club, but Atlanta's one of the biggest cities in the South, and we have the lamest jazz scene here. It's not even, it's not even worth going out to see. They used to have a jazz club, and it was this restaurant that I went to one time, and they had the group playing in the corner of the restaurant with the windows behind them, where the sound was terrible, and I was the youngest guy there, and I was probably 48 then. Okay, that was, maybe 10 years ago. Maybe I was 45 or so, and I was by far the youngest person there. And it's like, it was a completely cheesy scene. There was some guy that was playing the steel drum, and it was really, really horrible. I don't know what, I can't even remember what the group was. I don't even know. If it was probably just a pickup gig. So I don't even know if they were outside players or whoever. I hadn't heard of anybody in the band. But it was just, and the players were fine. The guys that were playing were fine. It was just such a lame scene, and people didn't care. So that's kind of what jazz has been relegated to. It's the either the university setting where you have people that teach things, like at Berkeley, for example, where there's a whole methodology behind teaching jazz that is set up so that they don't teach, they teach jazz, and it's a very structured kind of thing. What I do here on my channel is I teach improvisation, and it's not, to me, jazz is improvised music. It's not, that's one of the things about it, but the idea that Kenny G is jazz, and if you read the comments, just go to my video about why do people hate jazz. I did a live stream a couple weeks ago. It's got 60, 70,000 views, but the comments are appalling. I just basically put that video out there just to see what people would write. Why do people hate jazz? And everybody that hates jazz, I think most of the people there aren't people that follow my channel. I think people that, the people that were defending jazz were people that follow my channel. I think it was people that would see the title, Why Do People Hate Jazz? They're like, oh, I hate jazz. I'm going to write something on this. And they'll watch 5 minutes of the video and they say, yes, I hate jazz. And then they go on and they say everything. Jazz is background music. Yeah, great background music. Exactly. Now, jazz shouldn't be background music. Jazz is a language. I was trying to explain this to, I went to this party with my 4-year-old Layla last night, some friends from her preschool. And I was talking to some of the parents, and we were talking about jazz. And the parents, they don't understand it at all either. They don't get that jazz is a language. I was trying to explain. I said, it's like Chinese. So two of my kids study Chinese, right? They're in the language immersion. Well, Dylan studies German now. But anyways, so if you listen to a language that you'd understand, it's just gibberish. You don't know where a sentence begins or ends, okay? The idea that you actually have to have some type of knowledge, and the bar for that knowledge used to be, when I was growing up, because music education was held in high esteem in public schools in the 60s and 70s, and it was not inclusive. I'll say that. It absolutely was not inclusive. And I'm not really necessarily a proponent of having an all-inclusive music program. I think that just because people want to play doesn't mean that they should be able to play. My school, and people say, oh, jazz is an elitist thing. No, it's like, first of all, people should play music because they want to play music. Parents shouldn't force their kids to play music. I don't force my kids to play music. My son Dylan doesn't take piano lessons anymore because he doesn't want to practice. And if he doesn't want to practice, he's not going to take lessons. It's just a waste of time, that should be for people that want to do it and they're passionate about it. Well, they used to have a thing called the Seashore Test when I was growing up. And it was a musical aptitude test that everybody would take in my school district in upstate New York when they were in 2nd or 3rd grade. They would take it. Everybody that got the highest scores on it got to choose from the string orchestra program first, and then the next group of people got to choose band instruments. The string players started a year before the band players did, okay, the brass and wind players. So I started on the cello, and they never told us our results. They said, these are the people that have been selected for the music program. I had no idea, right? I got selected. Why? Because I had a great ear, apparently. And that was it. We had 11 full-time faculty members. I'm from a small town, 5,000 people in upstate New York. But you know what? They cared about the music program with 11 full-time faculty members. It's insane to think about now. So because of that, because of this background, we never played cheesy arrangements of orchestral music, okay? We played the real stuff. I remember I got an opportunity in 7th grade, and this made a big impression on me. Do you want to play in a chamber orchestra for the summer? And if I did, I had to switch to bass. So I said yes. So I went from the cello to the bass. And I went for 3 weeks or so. We did every day the string orchestra. And I remember one of the pieces was the Bach Brandenburg Concerto number 3. And we were going to play that. I got my record player out. I got that third Brandenburg Concerto. And I learned that bass part from memory. And I went and played with this string orchestra, and it was amazing. It was playing the real Brandenburg Concertos. We played a couple of them. I think we played 3 and 5, or maybe 3 and 6. And this was serious. I mean, the players were serious. One of the reasons is that I live in close proximity where I grew up to Eastman School of Music. And a lot of the Eastman professors, which is one of the best music schools in the world, lived in my hometown. So their kids would go to school with me, and they'd be in the music program. So you had all these people, and all the kids took lessons. You got lessons provided in school by once a week with the teachers at school, and you got lessons provided, and everyone else I knew that was in the orchestra program and the band program took lessons outside of school with people that were Eastman professors or people that had master's degrees from Eastman. Just like our teachers, the head of the program had a doctorate from Eastman. We had people that had multiple doctorates. Everyone had master's degrees in music of the 11 full-time faculty member in our school system. Okay. That's how I grew up. That's why I have this incredible advantage over people today, over kids today. My kids don't have that advantage. Well, they do because I've taught them, but in their school, I'm on the academic committee at my kids' school. Okay, I used to be a board member. I don't even have control being on the academic committee of who they hire and who they don't hire for their music program. I just don't. They hire whoever they want because it's not part of the academic committee to tell the administration what to do, unfortunately, because I would do if I was running it, I would run it completely differently. I'd get somebody that is a, piano player, and I would teach them harmony. I would teach kids music. I would teach them things about musical styles. So, these are things that I grew up doing. When I used to tell my mom when I was a college professor, I'd say, I get these kids come in, and I noticed this change in around 91. So I was a college music professor, a jazz studies professor from 1987 till 1992. Okay, so from the time I was 25 to 32, I think. And I'm 55 years old. So back then, when I started, was really the jazz was starting to get on the decline right then in 87. I noticed a change in the students around 1990. Something happened with the parents of those kids and their musical taste and background that changed the quality of students that we had coming to school when I was a professor. It was really around 1991. Part of it was that there was the Gulf War and there was a recession that happened. So they had to lower the standards and let people in that were not qualified to be in music school, basically to keep the numbers up where I was teaching. Nirvana did not make it worse, actually, Ken. I disagree with you on there. Nirvana absolutely did not make it worse. I'll explain that after. Anyways, there was a noticeable difference. So I remember going and telling my mom, I was like, Mom, I got these students, they can't figure out anything. She said, what are you talking about? My mom didn't play. My mom played basic rudimentary piano and guitar, basic stuff. She said, what are you talking about? I said, people can't figure out songs. She said, what do you mean? Like the chords? I said, yeah, chords, melody. They can't listen to a record and figure out songs. She said, you're kidding me, right? I said, no. And everyone that I knew before then, anybody I grew up with, everyone could do that. That was just like, basic musical competence. Anyone I went to school with that I grew up with could listen to a record and pick stuff off it. They may not be able to pick off, Keith Jarrett or Oscar Peterson, but they could pick up a lot of stuff. I mean, it's really unbelievable. A lot of the music, if you think about the sophistication of music that I grew up with, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, then you get into music like Led Zeppelin later on, much more sophisticated harmonically than what is going on the radio now, right? So what happened there is, as music became less and less sophisticated, popular music, because the people that grew up, think about this. John Lennon was born in 1940. He grew up listening to big band music because rock music had not been invented. When he was my kid's age, when he was Dylan's age, 10 is when rock music just started, basically. He grew up hearing big band music. Well, what did big band music at the time have? And bebop. What did they have? They had diminished chords. They had augmented chords. They had 6 chords. Why do you think the Beatles have chords like A6 that they'll end on I Want to Hold Your Hand? They had dominant 7 sus4 chords. They had half diminished chords. I mean, all these kind of things that they drew upon in their music. They had line cliches, Fixing a Hole, all these tunes that had line cliches, Stairway to Heaven. They have the minor to the minor major 7th to the minor 7th to the minor 6th down to the major 7th. All of these tunes had really sophisticated harmonic progressions. Anthony said George Martin helped with that. He did help with that, but these people, these guys heard that. McCartney, all of them heard those chord progressions all the time. The Beatles knew 1,000 cover tunes from being a cover band from 1957 to 1962. It's unbelievable, right? So they had this harmonic sophistication in popular music that they grew up with. They incorporated it into the popular music that I grew up with, which made me naturally gravitate towards things like jazz because I started to hear fusion in the late 60s, early 70s. And you would hear, when Fleetwood Mac would go out and play, they'd bring Return to Forever out with them, there wasn't this, the playlist on modern rock radio, or modern rock radio, the playlist on rock radio back then was incredibly varied. You had Motown, you had R&B tunes, you had, rock tunes, all this kind of stuff. Okay. So that was one part of it. The other part of it was what I talked about in the video, that all the bands here, so you have Miles Davis, okay? So Miles in the 50s and 60s found all the best young players, brought them in his band, in some cases stole their music and put his name on them because they didn't know that the publishing was worth money. Miles knew that. And it's just the same as Max Martin today that pays people to... that he either employs to be co-writers or that he writes with or come in and bring in grooves. Because Max Martin's in his late 40s. These people don't know what's hip all the time. All the people that are writing pop songs, because all this popular music today, when you listen to the stuff, I don't care what, I was listening to the top 10 yesterday. I listened to all of it, and I was hearing the Imagine Dragons new songs. I mean, these things, everything in the top 10 is all created by producers. You can tell because of the super high production value of everything, no matter what it is. Not necessarily stuff. When you look at the album charts, I saw The National, who's a great indie rock band, had the number 2 record on iTunes yesterday. But everything is producer driven. It's old people that are like me that are the only ones that can write the songs that have the super fast hooks that happen every 7 seconds, and you can hear the production values, even with the simplicity in the music and the simplicity of the arrangements. You hear that production value, that super pop production value that's done by professional. That's done by professional producers. It's all producer driven. It's written by professional songwriters. It's produced by professional people. It doesn't matter who the artists are. They're just faces. In country music, and it doesn't matter. In hip hop, all this stuff. They're all just faces for these guys my age to put out their music that they're just doing to make a living, essentially. Okay, and they'll do it as long as they can. And frankly, it's a bunch of middle-aged white guys that run all the record labels for the most part. It's guys my age that run all the major labels. They're the ones that are deciding on what gets on the radio. Okay, when everybody blames the radio for playing stuff and blames this and that, look, the records get made by record labels unless they're things that happened. Unless there are things that happen on YouTube right here that become massively big, and the people have their platform where they can have a voice, and you can develop a massively big following here on YouTube and basically bypass the record labels, okay, and sell 1 million records. There's Melanie Martinez, people like that. They're huge that have 1 billion plays here and have 5 million subscribers. They don't need record labels. But the problem is the labels are the only place that you can get on the radio. Okay, so all this dumbed down, producer-driven music that's written by a bunch of old guys like me, that's the only thing that kids are hearing today. Okay, I keep seeing Jacob Collier. Jacob Collier is one guy. Okay. That's it. He's just one guy. He's one kid. Well, he's not a kid. He's 23 years old. Okay, Jacob Collier. Back 30 years ago, there were 25 Jacob Colliers. There was Jacob Collier. There was Herbie Hancock. There was Keith Jarrett. There was, the problems with the music business are not going to be solved by Jacob Collier or Joey Alexander or a few people that are, in some ways just props to be talked about by people that are used by the media to say that jazz is still alive or whatever. And it's nothing to take away from their brilliance or anything, right? Snarky Puppy, I love Snarky Puppy. But these are anomalies really today. So the music business is really run by a bunch of guys that look like me. And they decide what gets made, period. How do I know that? Because I know all of them. I've had the president of Atlantic Records right here in this room. He came here one day back in 2008, 2009. Spent 8 hours here. The president of Atlantic Records. He pulled into the driveway here, and my wife says, who's that guy standing out in the driveway? I said, that's the president of Atlantic Records. She goes, he's younger than you are. And I said, yeah, I think we're about the same age. He just looks younger than I am. But the same guy, he's still president of Atlantic Records. And you know what? All the people that run the record labels, the people that run Universal Records, Monty and Avery Lipman, they still run these people that have run the labels since the 90s, okay, run Universal and they run Republic Records, okay? Anything that's on those record labels are signed by those guys, those two guys. They decide what goes out, okay? Craig Kellman at Atlantic Records, he decides what gets signed. Him alone. They have people that are A&R people, that are some guys that are good friends of mine. But really, whoever, they decide what gets pushed. Well, nothing can get on the radio unless it's on a major label. I'm talking terrestrial radio, okay? That's a thing that people don't understand. Jazz makes no money and classical music make no money anymore. In the old days, they used to be funded by the rock and pop records, okay? If you had, in the late 90s, anything, you would go back to the 80s, the 80s, when hip hop was getting big, or the early 90s when hip hop was big and grunge was big and all this stuff. Those records that sold, or the boy bands of the late 90s, those things provided money for for Blue Note and for all those things. That was the budget for the records. People actually had money to make records. I have friends that had record deals that got signed to jazz labels, Columbia Records. I have a friend that signed to Columbia Records in 1990 and got $180,000 to make a record. $180,000 to make a jazz record. Rock bands, nobody gets $180,000 to make a record anymore. That's ridiculous. I was making records in the early 2000s, up until about 2005, when people would just say, okay, here's your budget. Here's $150,000 with a new band. Make a record, give it back to me. That would be it. I would hire, I'd rent stuff. We'd go up to Nashville if we needed to get to do session stuff up there, whatever. Somebody says, talking about Hans Zimmer. Okay, Hans Zimmer is another guy. I'm on my non sequitur, but Hans Zimmer is essentially is exactly like Max Martin. Hans Zimmer hires people to work for him to write cues. He's the interface between him and the movie companies. They like working with him. They know that they're going to get quality because he goes and has wait, what's this good? There was a funny comment there. Hans will, there's people that work for him that write cues for movies, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. He's the one that oversees it. He's essentially like the producer, okay? He's like he's the equivalent of Max Martin or Dr. Luke or whoever. People that have stables of other writers that write for them. He's a contractor who hires subcontractors. Thank you. And that is really what the music business is now, because it's so competitive for the little money. The music business and the movie business, it's super competitive, okay? So this is kind of why, because of the competitive nature, everything has gotten to this point where it's all done everybody's competing for this little amount of money. It has been like this for a while. When I went up to Nashville, I had a number one song in Nashville the end of 2013 as a writer, song with the band Parmalee. It was a number one platinum selling song that I wrote in 2007 with this band. They're still a band. They're a big band. Parmalee's a big band. So I got put in with writing with all the top writers. And the first guy I got in with is a really, really dear friend of mine. His name's Monty. So I got in my first writing session. I said, Monty, tell me about this and everything. He'd tell me about how people made a living in Nashville, because I had never written a country song. I wrote one country song that went number one. So they immediately put you in with all the top country writers. Feels like Carolina. There you go, Tom. So anyways, he starts explaining to me, well, people used to be able to make a living here by writing album tracks. So you had very creative songs. People would just write whatever came to mind, and really creative music and country that happened. If you look at the early Dixie Chicks record, like Home, has phenomenally good songs on it. I mean, really, really great songs on it. But he said it got so competitive that you couldn't make a living writing album tracks. So everyone just tried to outdo each other to get the singles, because the singles, an album track was worth about a typical record was worth about $3,500. Now, for people that have families, all these guys in Nashville have families. They're all competing against each other to get somebody to perform their song. Okay, so that is the essence of the problem there. So if everyone's trying to write a single, you get music that all sounds the same. Okay. And there's no one to blame for it except for the fact that everything is free. I mean, that, like, once music became free, then that was it. That was the great equalizer. YouTube right here is the great equalizer, So the money for jazz is free. Jazz makes no money at all. We have 320 million people in this country. To have a number one jazz record, you have to sell about 1,000 records a week, either jazz or country. Jazz or classical. If I did a jazz record or a classical record, I probably could have a number one record. If everybody on this live stream bought my record, then I think that that plus a few extra people, I'd have a number one record. It's pretty hilarious, right? If we did a pre-sale and I could promote it ahead of time, I'd be like, come on, everybody, buy my record for the first week. Let's make it number one. I mean, it would be hilarious, right? Like, what have I done to have the number one record? Well, I guess I do a lot of videos on here. Anyway, so people, if you accept the premise that music isn't worth anything to people, music education isn't worth anything to people either, okay? But it should be, because having great music programs are help make great minds, okay? The popularity of jazz would be taken care of if people valued music and music education. And my son is in a magnet school. He just got into this new school, and they have music 5 days a week. It's unbelievable. 5 days a week they have music. Why? It's the top-rated school in Georgia. Why do they have music 5 days a week? Well, one of the reasons is they realize that kids that play instruments are smart kids, okay? And somebody says, Bach didn't care about record sales. Bach cared about making a living. He had 20 kids. Well, only 10 that survived. Bach cared a lot about making a living, which is why we have all this music. He had to write a cantata every week. He wrote the St. Matthew Passion, the St. John Passion. He had assignments every single week that he had to do. He had to write music to make a living for his family. Baloney. Bach had to worry about, he wrote music based around whatever ensemble that he had there. He worked for the church. He had duties. That's right. So all those musicians did. Beethoven went out. He was the first guy that freelanced and basically sold his music to other people. Everybody else beforehand, whether it was Haydn, some people like Haydn had very cushy gigs where they could write stuff and had a lot of freedom, didn't have to have as many students, things like that. But so along with music not having its place in society as far as music education with young kids, it comes down to the fact too that most music now is not, that you hear on the radio, is all keyboard driven. So there's nobody buying guitars. There's nobody who takes piano lessons anymore. My kids don't even take piano lessons, right? I can't even get my kids to take piano lessons. Okay? When I was growing up, everybody took piano lessons. I didn't take a piano lesson. My parents couldn't afford a piano. I took guitar lessons. They could afford a guitar for me. But everybody took piano lessons. That was just part of, I knew it didn't matter. You could be on the football team. Half the people that were in the music program where I went to school were all state football players. They didn't care. They played the sax, they played the drums, they played the French horn, whatever. It was, whoever were the best musicians got to be the best players. It's funny because a lot of people that were the best athletes were also great musicians because they had rhythm to play these instruments. They had great ears for things too. I went to college on a track scholarship. I don't know if I ever say that here. That's how I got into college because my grades were so bad, and then I transferred into music on my second semester. So, because everything is all keyboard driven, essentially because all these operating systems come with recording programs. If you buy an Apple computer, you get GarageBand. If you buy a PC, you get whatever PCs come with, and all these MIDI interfaces plug right in via USB or whatever the connector is, and anybody can be a songwriter. Okay, so that is really why, and no one is really studying anything. Oh, they don't have to. You just pick out a loop and you start writing to it. You program a piano. It's just like what's his name there? Who's the guy? I'm trying to think. It's on one of the videos that plays on one of the ads that says I should know the keyboard thing. He's a EDM guy. Oh brother, where he says I should learn these chords because he's just putting the notes in MIDI. He's just doing triads, and I was laughing because it's like, yeah, Dead Mouse. That's right, Dead Mouse. He's he's putting the chords. He goes, I should really learn how to do it. It's like, yeah, dude, they're only 3-note chords. Come on, man. You got to drag a mouse to do that? You can turn on YouTube and find a tutorial in 5 minutes to teach you where to put your fingers. It's way faster than moving the notes with a mouse. He's got an ear. He can hear the stuff. He writes great. He writes some great music, and he could easily do that. It's like plug in a keyboard, man. It'll save you 15 minutes to play your triads, right? So, anyways, that's the whole thing. And this whole quantized step recording, all that kind of stuff is ridiculous. When somebody's saying, Josh just said about the 10,000 hours. You know what kids have 10,000 hours doing when they go to college now? They say the average 21-year-old has 10,000 hours in video games, all right, to be an expert. I don't buy that Malcolm Gladwell thing. I keep forgetting to do my 10,000 hour video about 10,000 hours, so I think that's a bunch of baloney, the whole 10,000 hour rule. Some people can become great in 2,000 hours. Some people become great in 25,000 hours. It's just, it's all about your work ethic. People are like, how do you remember all this stuff that, doing all these different genres of music that I do and everything? Well, I'm 55 years old. I've had 5 decades to learn all this stuff. And I learned stuff in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. And you just keep learning. So, I know that, I said this yesterday on Facebook, I can't play like Alan Holdsworth. I play like me. I wish I could play like Alan Holdsworth on the guitar. I wish I could play, I do what I do really well. My chops are never going to be, I'll never have the left hand like John Petrucci, like some of these people that I interview, like Sinister Gates. I don't have the right hand chops. These guys are great. I can't do that because I didn't learn to do that in my 20s. And that's one of the things that you need to really get together when you're young, is your chops. Okay. I love Sinister. He's the man. He's such a great dude. So, anyways, it doesn't matter any of that stuff. It's about, how good can you be yourself? Because really that's all that matters. Are you the best you? Okay? Now, my video here started out on jazz, but just like jazz, I improvise all my videos. Every video that you watch, and by the way, please watch my new video, okay? Not that many people have seen it, but I think it's one of my best videos. It's the one about the Scale Wars. It's kind of a dumb name, but it was kind of my Star Wars reference here. But I have one of my favorite pieces that I've composed for any of my videos that is in it that I'd love for you guys to hear. So if you haven't watched it yet, check it out. Anyways, so this is, I'm improvising on this. I'm trying to take an idea and I go with it. And then I see something here and I go another direction. So back to Nirvana. I love Nirvana. Now people say, Rick, you love Nirvana? What? Kurt Cobain wasn't a great guitar player. Kurt Cobain was an amazing melody writer, one of the best ever. Phenomenal melody writer. Okay? I used to, my jazz students would say, what are you talking about? You're talking about Kurt Cobain? I remember I wrote the melody to On a Plane. Oh, I love On a Plane. It's like my favorite Nirvana song. I wrote the melody to Teen Spirit right when it first came out, when I was a music professor. I said, you know what this melody is? And all the nerds in music school that I was teaching, none of them knew what it was because they didn't listen to the radio. And I was like, that's Nirvana. And they're like, what? And I had the chords up there. I did F sus4 because he really plays F sus4 in the beginning of it, right? And I put all the chords. I put the F, A flat, B flat, D flat, and I wrote the melody and I analyzed it. And it's a super sophisticated melody actually that has a lot of upper extensions in it. And Kurt Cobain's melodies are incredibly well constructed. Things like In Bloom that modulate all over the place are really, really sophisticated actually. Some of the most sophisticated melodies, if you look at Heart-Shaped Box, that starts, A flat, or well, let's say it's in the guitar key, A, F, D, and I think it was all down a half step. All these third related chromatic mediant modulations, A major, F major, D major. Okay. Nirvana was a massively big influence on me, and I was 30 years old when I heard Bleach when I was, geez, how old was I? 1988 or so it came out, 1989. I mean, I was not 30 yet. I turned 30 in 1992. So I was in my 20s still. I was 28 or so. Anyway, so, Rush. My brother played golf with Alex Lifeson this past week. And that was the highlight of his life, I think, other than his getting married and his son. He loves Rush. I loved Rush. And he played with Alex, played golf in Rochester at Oak Hill this past week. And he said Alex was the absolute nicest guy in the world. They went out to dinner with him the night before. And Alex owns a golf club apparently up in Toronto. And my brother played in his foursome. He sent me some videos and everything. And I said, let's get him on Sounding Off, because that would be amazing to have Alex on. So I'm working on that. Anyways, okay. I've gone over an hour with my rant here, but they might take it down too, because I played stuff on here. They may take this rant down. But tell your friends about my channel. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Rick's Rants. This is like my my Apple rant. But I do rants like this on music. I love doing rants on music. I can do this. I can do this forever. But part of the problem, the reason that people don't like jazz, is really because they just are not educated in music at a young age, period. That's it. Okay? If somebody asks me about Jacob Collier again, I'll get Jacob Collier on here and we can talk to Jacob Collier. Anyways, you guys are awesome. Stay pissed. That's funny. You guys are awesome. I love this. Like this video. Leave comments, everything. There's only 128 thumbs up and there's 376 people on here. Come on, guys. You can't like it. This thing, you can't go from 376. This should be way over 400 right now if there's 376 people on here. Hit the like button. Hit that thumbs up. Man, this is unbelievable. When you watch my videos, leave comments. You know, I have to tell people to leave comments nowadays. It's like, come on, man, leave comments. Comments are awesome. I'm going to have Guthrie on too. I keep saying that. I've heard Guthrie emailed me. I'm going to get Guthrie Govan on. I love Guthrie. He's amazing. Give thumbs up. When you see my videos, thumbs up. Rick's doing this. I don't get paid anything here. I get paid a 0.00125 cents per view, which comes out to not very much. Okay? Buy my book if you want to support me, because you get something out of it. Buy the Beato book. You guys are so awesome. But look, come on. It's at 279. That's all I can get. There's 351 people on here now. This should be way over this. Marty Friedman Sounding Off is coming up. The video was totally screwed up with the audio because he's in Japan and it's so out of sync and it's an hour long and I'm trying to get the video, the audio synced with the video. Oh, it's a nightmare. It was during my whole computer meltdown thing was my Marty Friedman interview. It's at 291. Come on, does somebody remove their thumbs up or something? What's up with this? Come on, 291, hit those thumbs up here. Give it a thumbs up. Get over 334. There should be way more people. Not everybody that's on here has liked it. 400 earlier. There you go. All right, you guys are awesome. I'll see you later. Have a great night.